So good afternoon, everybody. I'm Colin. I'm the co-chair of the Cal Coaching Network, a community of practice, sponsored staff organization by Berkeley People and Culture. We are a new staff organization, been around for a couple of years now. And I'll go ahead and drop just a brand new document that's hot off the presses that gives you a little bit of an update of where we are as a community of practice. Some of the things that we're focusing on in our strategy, a little bit of our background in the first 2 years of progress in this space and how you've been a part of that, and a little bit about where we're going next in the work that we're doing as a volunteer organization. A big shout out to our leadership team who are in the room today. I saw Nancy in the space who facilitated in Berkeley Facilitators Network earlier today. So a big round of applause for Nancy and that wonderful facilitation. We have Meg. Anybody else who's here from the CCM leadership team, give us a wave, give us a what's up. Wanted to also express gratitude and appreciation for your hard work leading the network. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and start us off with our program. We're so excited to have Pamela Rich and Sabina Morgan with us today, and they're going to go ahead and do a deeper introduction of themselves in a few moments. I'm here to get out of the way very quickly, and you know that's very hard for me because I am a talker, but you have a little bit of the background information about the network for today, and I want to make sure that you have access to that as a leave behind. So go ahead and read a little bit more about that as you are sent forth to learn more about the network, our mission, our vision, our purpose, our guiding values, and a little bit of our work into the future. Now it's time for me to pass it over to Sabina Morgan and Pamela Rich to facilitate a session today on an introduction to appreciative inquiry. So with that, Pam, Sabina, thank you so much and welcome to Cal Coaching Network. I know y'all aren't strangers to this space, so thank you so much for all of your hard work, and we're really looking forward to your presentation and interactive process today. The floor is yours, and thanks again.
Thanks, Colin. Let's see. So I am Pam Rich, and I work on the same team with Colin at People and Organization Development, which is part of People and Culture. And the focus of my work on campus tends to be strategic planning and team development. I like to create meeting structures to enable meaningful conversations that support participatory decision-making. I was in a session with Nancy earlier today where we were trying to support those ends. I support teams from across campus as a campus consultant, and I seek to make happier and healthier, more efficient and more effective workplaces. A lot of my philosophy comes from the notion that the wisdom is in the room. You know your work best. And so the meeting strategies are designed to surface the knowledge that you have and work with you to bring conclusions for your team that will work the best. I'm excited to do this presentation on appreciative inquiry because it's something that I try to do in all of the work that I do, even though I tend to have sort of an innate negative disposition, I think. So, and with that, Sabina, I'll turn it over to you.
That's funny. I would never have described you as having an innately negative disposition, but it's interesting what we see about ourselves. Hi, everyone. I'm Sabina Morgan. I am a senior organizational consultant for the Division of Student Affairs. I've been on campus for about 17 years now. I started as a transfer reentry student parent. I was an adult when I got here, so I was a work study student doing academic personnel and merit and tenure reviews. And so it goes. I've been in student affairs now since 2011. I oversee learning and development for the Division of Student Affairs, and I support large-scale change management and strategic planning efforts that really cross departmental boundaries. So it's 42 different departments in student affairs. We touch everything that happens outside of the classroom. I know there's some folks here from the area today, so thank you so much for being here, and I'm excited to be with the rest of you and kind of share some of the approaches, right? Appreciative inquiry is kind of a foundation to the way I approach my work. I really am, both here and in my life, passionate about facilitating whole person learning opportunities. I did my master's in leadership, and I did my thesis on whole person wellness. And it was in this presentation that I realized not only did I do collaborative inquiry, but when I was putting this together, I realized, oh my gosh, it was actually an appreciative inquiry also. And so it's really beautiful to see how this can come to life as not just a tool, but also a way of approaching the world. So with that, we're really excited to kind of unpack what is appreciative inquiry, and I'll turn it back to Pam. I lied. I will not turn it back to Pam. Not true, because I'm going to read the land acknowledgement. Bear with me just 1 second, since I don't have my reading glasses and can't see my screen. Here we go. So we recognize that UC Berkeley sits on the territory of Huchun, the ancestral and unceded land of the Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone people, the successors of the sovereign Verona Band of Alameda County. This land was and continues to be of great importance to the Muwekma Ohlone tribe and other familial descendants of the Verona Band. We do recognize that every member of the Berkeley community has and continues to benefit from the use and occupation of this land since the institution's founding in 1868. Consistent with our values of community, inclusion, and diversity, we have a responsibility to acknowledge and make visible the university's relationship to Native peoples. As members of the Berkeley community, it's vitally important that we not only recognize the history of the land on which we stand, but also we recognize that the Muwekma Ohlone people are alive and flourishing members of the Berkeley and broader Bay Area communities today.
Thank you, Sabina. All right, so we want to take a look at what we're going to be doing today. So we're currently in the welcome and check-in portion of our program, and we want to spend a little bit of time talking about what is appreciative inquiry, and when it's abbreviated as AI, they use a small I to distinguish it from artificial intelligence, which seems to somehow have gotten the upper hand on this one. We want to look at appreciative inquiry in different contexts. We're going to give you a scenario to practice creating powerful questions. Then we have an activity called You at Your Best. And throughout, we'll offer certain opportunities to ask questions. So just to go over a couple of agreements for today that I'm hoping that everybody can abide by. We want to listen for understanding, respect diverse perspectives, speak from your own experience, share airtime, respect confidentiality, take care of yourself. We understand that this is a volunteer participation that you're doing today. So if you have something you need to run off to, please take care of yourself. And we're also hoping that today is both a learning opportunity and that it will be fun. So we wanted to do a check-in question to kind of get us in the mood for appreciative inquiry. And I would like you to think about 3 things that you're grateful for. And they can be tiny little things like, I'm really loving the slice of lemon in my water this afternoon. Or it can be something really big, the love that I share with my husband or something like that. So 3 things that you are grateful for today. My family sees chocolates, weekends, meal prep chili, coffee, my puppy, smoothie for lunch, sunny weather, my job, a sensible child.
Definitely.
And we all want one of those. Flexibility to work from home, a new rescue dog, early morning walk.
Being able to afford gas is definitely a big one to be grateful for these days, isn't it?
Especially if you have to drive into the office.
Francesca, I love that you have Pop-Tarts.
Someone is grateful for their crazy kids. All right. Thank you so much for sharing. I think those kind of get us in the mood for thinking about appreciative inquiry. I'm going to read a definition. Appreciative inquiry is an asset-based approach to organizational and social engagement that utilizes questions and dialogue to help participants uncover existing strengths, advantages, or opportunities in their communities, organizations, or teams. And many of these ideas were developed by David Cooperrider and Suresh Srivastava. And I'm not sure if I said that right. But in other words, in appreciative inquiry, we want to look from a strengths-based perspective to try to solve our organizational conundrums. So in this model, participants use questions and conversation to uncover strengths, advantages, or opportunities in their communities or organizations, and then collectively work to developing and implementing strategies for improvement. And I want to emphasize that appreciative inquiry is both a model and it's also a culture shift or perhaps mindset. And there are different, and as I said, I sometimes come into the world in this sort of everything's wrong, this is negative, appreciative inquiry sort of shifts that mindset and emphasizes the positive idea generation over negative problem identification. The idea is that we promote psychological safety, wellness, and have more sort of human-centered problem solving. The idea is to uncover what could be rather than sort of looking at what's the problem that we're mired in currently. So appreciative inquiry uses something called the 5D model. And these are the steps that happen in an appreciative inquiry process. First, we start with the definition. And this is clarifying what question or topic of inquiry are we trying to get our heads around. And this phase of the process clarifies the scope and the goals. We look towards positive solutions to this process, and it starts by looking what's already working, not what's wrong. The next phase is discovery or appreciating, and this phase surfaces the most positive features of whatever we're looking at. When have things been at their best? What were the conditions that created that? Even the smallest wins. I have a friend who used to do tutoring for, I think it was middle school students. And she would say things to me like, oh, I would say, oh, look, I see you have a period here. Where else in this paper might we want to add a period? And so you're looking at anything in the process that's working well, that's something that you want to build on. The next phase is dream. And that's where you're doing your envisioning or your visioning process. What's the desired state? And what ideas emerge from what has already been working well? You want to bridge the best of what is and what might be and stretch that status quo. The next level is design. And this is the co-constructing part where participants start to plan how they might sort of take some of the elements of this dream and work together to make them happen. And finally, the last stage is deliver or destiny. This is an innovating phase where we're implementing those ideas. We're taking those ideas that came from the design phase that were co-constructed by in the design phase and moving into that implementation of how we're going to put those into work. And let's see, these are the foundations that can apply both to coaching and advising, and we'll be getting to that in a bit.
Thank you so much, Pam. And yeah, and so, Pam has shown the steps of a model, but appreciative inquiry is more than just a model that can be applied. And I want to help unpack that a little bit by explaining the principles that support the process of appreciative inquiry. So what you see here are the 5 principles of AI, and these really inform the mindset part of this approach. And so therefore we can take from this and apply it in an advising or a coaching context or a team engagement context. When we think about the questions that we might be asking in the world, whether we're engaging with our coworkers or our direct reports or peers or people we're leading in work groups, or if we're talking with our family or friends, or for me, I think most importantly, when we're talking with ourselves, we can have an impact on the direction of every conversation we engage in. So these principles of appreciative inquiry are foundational to an appreciative mindset, and their power is really as potent in our everyday lives as they are in a coaching, advising, or a formalized strategic approach. So one of the key concepts that I drive home in any of the leadership development programs that I'm leading is the idea that what we plant grows, right? So we have to be mindful of what we're scattering and where we're scattering it. The principles of AI illuminate for us how this works in practice and why. So the first principle is positive, right? Positive questions lead to positive change. Momentum for small or large scale change is best generated through positive questions that amplify the positive core. What are we doing well and how can we do more of it? The positive principle is really about the emotional context in which the goal is framed. So encouragement, personal support, and other forms of positive effect can have a pivotal impact on the way a person goes about enacting change. So even acknowledging and feeling grateful for the mere presence of others in one's life can really strengthen the extent in which a person feels empowered to embrace growth, right? When we ask positive questions, we have the opportunity to generate positive change. It's constructionist, right? Words create worlds. Reality as we know it is a subjective versus objective state, and it's socially created through language and conversation. People construct their understanding of reality through language. So reality is subjective, not objective. So the narrative one has of oneself is often resorted to in order to justify certain actions or beliefs about the world. So AI can be said to treat social psychological reality as a product of the moment that's open to reconstruction, right? If our words create worlds, by shifting our words, we have an opportunity to reconstruct our notion of possible. I'm going to talk about inquiry creates change, right? Simultaneity. We can choose what we study. What we choose to study describes or even creates the world as we know it. A vivid image of an internalized goal or vision is what inspires and motivates people to do things and improve themselves. If the image that you're driving toward is framed in a positive and powerful fashion, it's likely that it's going to have a strong positive effect on the individual's present and the next move that person will make. If you are focusing on inquiring about how to do more of what works versus what's going on with what's broken, the notion of what's possible shifts based on that. So this is this next principle, right? That inquiry creates change. The moment we ask a question, we begin to create a change. The questions that we ask are truly fateful. Questions hold the potential to trigger immediate change. So for instance, asking with genuine curiosity and interest, and this is the important part, it's asking with genuine curiosity and interest why a person operates in a given way, right? It's not, why'd you do that? Why are you doing this way? But it's really asking with genuine interest. This is the direction that we're trying to go. I see that you made this choice. Help me understand how that gets you to here. Like, what skills are you pulling on, or what are you trying to accomplish with that so that I can support you in that, right? It's a very different question from why are you doing that? But asking these questions with genuine curiosity and interest likely is going to have a thought-provoking effect on the person that you're asking for. And maybe if not in the moment, when they're alone, that person will begin reflecting on whether there are better, faster, less stressful ways of proceeding with the things that they're in charge of. This can create a momentary sense of openness and really encourage self-improvement and reflexivity that's self-driven. The last principle is that imagination drives action, right? Human systems move in the direction of their images of the future. How we approach a conversation shapes the outcome. Life story is vital. Life can be understood as a narrative. Our stories matter. Like poetry and prose, these narratives can ignite creativity and are interpreted differently by different people. So considering life in this way really creates the space to allow the processing of subjective feelings and emotions surrounding a situation, not just the facts. So this is not in the way you would do something with a poem or a story. I can give you a list of facts, but when I tell you a story that illustrates how something comes to life and create an image, that's going to be very different experience than a list of facts that one might give you. So AI is really grounded on these principles that our conversations should be positive, can be in this method, positive, constructionist, poetic, meaning based in story, that our inquiry alone creates change and that imagination drives action. So we want to pause here for a second, and we are going to unpack more about how you use this model and mindset in different contexts, but we just want to see if there's any questions about the 5 steps in the model or the principles that underlie the approach.
Hi, I'm Teresha. I just want to make sure that I didn't miss something, because you made a statement which was really good when you said you were talking about the conversation and how the conversation should be positive. I'm just trying to read my notes. And our approach to the conversation shapes the outcome, which I totally agree. But how would you, and I don't know if I'm veering off, so please wheel me back in. How would you approach, like if you're trying to approach the conversation in a way so that the outcome can be good, or how, I'm trying to figure, how would this come into play if the other person isn't that way, if that makes sense? Like if you're trying to direct the conversation a certain way or approach it a certain way, but it becomes like a battle because another person may not be approaching it the same way. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but
yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And yes, that is definitely something that we want to be mindful of. And we're going to talk about what conditions need to be present for AI to really be successful and embraced. If you're in a situation with low trust and you're saying, oh, let's just be positive, that's not going to land well, right? That won't land well. And so it's about creating conditions that make that possible. So we will unpack a little bit later in the presentation what some of the conditions, what conditions should be present to be most effective in this approach, and how you can start building a foundation to bring people along on this kind of journey, how you can start planting seeds in your organization.
okay, good. Thank you.
And just to sort of underscore that, Teresha, it's not, appreciative inquiry isn't about being a Pollyanna and not uncovering things that maybe aren't working well.
Okay.
And I think the idea is kind of creating the vision of what you want and moving towards that, rather than dwelling in sort of the problem and what's not working.
Okay.
And I was thinking about kind of, I think sort of in anything, like if you're walking, if you're riding a horse, if you're skiing, you look in the direction you want to go. And if you don't, you'll go in the direction that you don't want to go. So it's sort of that mindset of like, how do we go in the direction we want to go?
I like that. Thank you.
There were questions in the chat. We'll go with Ramat's first, and then we'll go over to Andrew's second. Ramad asks, how do you make it flow easily or remember the principles in action? What do y'all think? Sabina, Pam?
It's practice.
Yeah.
You know, if some of us have more of this mindset to start with, and so that may be easier, and some of us have to work a little harder to go like, oh yeah, how do we frame it in a way that moves us forward rather than keeps us sort of mired in what has been. And I'm not sure that you have to go through like a checklist in your head and make sure you check off all the boxes. But yeah, I would say practice. I don't know if you had anything to add to that, Sabina.
Yeah, I mean, I think practice is really vital. And I think one of the things I think about, right, is when I'm thinking, and in any coaching conversation, how am I expanding the field of possibility for the person I'm coaching versus narrowing? As coaches, we're not problem solving for people, right? To me, a problem solving approach is narrowing. Here's the problem. Let's narrow into a solution. That's not our job as a coach to do that, right? It may be to help that person narrow to a solution, right? But we do that by opening their notion of possibility. So the frame in which we ask the question, I think, is the just thinking about it from that perspective alone is how I make it flow, right? Is the question I'm asking going to expand a notion of possibility for this person, or is it going to narrow? So that's probably the easiest way I think about how to incorporate this. This has become a part of the way I approach the world.
Yeah, that's so great. Thank you, Sabina. And we've got one more question in the chat right now from Andrew. And I think we'll get to a little bit of this, but it's really on the same thread that you were just talking about, Sabina. What kinds of coaching strategies do you like to apply alongside AI? I like to take a supportive or asset-based kind of coaching stance when thinking about AI, but I'm kind of curious, how might you respond to Andrew's question?
I mean, for me, it's a strengths-based approach, right? That's the question that I'm asking in coaching. What are we doing well? How can we do more of it? How can we build that on your strengths? What are our assets? How do we make them work? Where have they worked before? So for me, this is a strengths-based approach. Appreciative inquiry and strengths align so beautifully. I don't know, Pam,
One
do you have?
thing, yeah, go for it, please, Pam. Yeah.
I would agree. And I think we're going to be doing some practice with this later, but we talk a lot in coaching about powerful questions. And so it's sort of getting our head around, how do I ask a powerful question that opens possibilities, as you said, Sabina.
Mm-hmm.
And
One
Jillian.
quote, yeah, Jillian's quote, if y'all don't mind me reading that, I think this is really like grounding for our concept kind of framework moment. The mindset reminds me of this: child, mom, I feel like I have an angry wolf and a peaceful wolf inside of me. Who is going to win? Mom says, the one that you feed. So I love that.
Mm-hmm. That's
Cool.
perfect.
We're good on questions for now. Would y'all like to move forward?
Yes, please.
So we are going to talk about how do you use this in different contexts, because there are some differences, right? When we're talking about a tool and we're talking about a mindset, like what is it? What are we really talking about? So we're going to do a little bit of unpacking. How would we use appreciative inquiry if we are using it for strategic planning? How does appreciative inquiry show up as a team engagement tool? And then how might we use it in coaching and advising? So we'll unpack each of those different spaces where this could be used.
Yeah, so appreciative inquiry was originally designed really kind of as a strategic planning tool. And most of you probably know, but a strategic plan is really a roadmap of where an organization is going. You discuss your vision, where you want to go, and then break it down into smaller pieces to clarify your main areas of focus. And from that, the actions that you are going to need to make progress on those areas of focus. All of the elements suggest moving toward the vision, and you can see how this can easily be applied to appreciative inquiry, since in both cases we're creating a vision and figuring it out, how to move toward it. And as I said, appreciative inquiry is not about solving problems. The problems aren't swept under the carpet. It's just a different way of framing. So in order to support staff morale, you might say, we're going to develop a staff satisfaction survey and implement the top three preferred strategies, not something like, we know that staff morale is really terrible, so let's explore all the things that aren't working. Sabina is going to go into some other considerations about using AI. And just, I would say, if you're using it in a situation where people have a lot of resentment or anger, and I think, Jerisha, maybe this kind of addresses your point a little bit, you might need to do some pre-work and trust building to make sure that people feel heard and understood before you start moving and thinking about the future. If people have hurt, the hurt needs to be acknowledged. And Sabina, I think I'll pass it over to you again.
Thank you. So as you can see, strategic planning is what it had been designed for. And so there is a model, but appreciative inquiry can also be used as an engagement tool in a less formal way. And so what you see on your screen here is the Berkeley employee engagement model, and it has three components: process, culture, and evolution, right? Process are the things that you see in this inner circle. Culture are the things that you see in the second circle. And then evolution are the things that you see here in this outer circle, right? So employee engagement measures an employee's level of enthusiasm about and commitment to their work and workplace. We know that engaged employees produce better outcomes than other employees who are not engaged. They remain with their organizations longer than their less engaged colleagues, and they experience less burnout in their roles. Broadly, when we're talking about employee engagement, it does refer to employees' emotional commitment to organizational goals. So in an AI approach to engagement, our questions and processes look at ownership and commitment. So you see the 12 elements we've identified here as critical to employee motivation and commitment. And again, I think, right, like I said, we have the opportunities to plant seeds that impact so many of these factors through the questions that we ask, the outcomes that we opt to acknowledge, and the developmental feedback and opportunities that we offer across the board, right? We have an opportunity to shift engagement through so many different factors. So when we consider that the principles of an AI approach allow us to move away from that deficit approach and instead shift to a mutual inquiry into shared potential, we can begin to see how utilizing this mindset might actually impact employee engagement, right? So these are questions, again, that are looking at ownership and commitment. Let me give you a few examples of how this shows up in practice. If you are in team meetings or groups, asking culture questions of your team: who do we want to be? When are we at our best? How do we define success in our context? Where do we feel successful? Who else is doing what we do well? What can we learn from them, right? Facilitated discussions about what is working leaves your team in a place where they can see their contributions and the positive results of their efforts. And it then drives encouragement and makes people want to participate. When we think back to the principles, another way this shows up in employee engagement, right? We can choose what we study. Some examples that we see in student affairs include places like the Dean of Students Culture Committee or the A&E Connect group, where employees come together cross-collaboratively from different departments and different functions to focus on really what underlies each team's ability to be successful. They ask the questions about what water are we all swimming in, right? So that we can shift that. These are examples of employee engagement spaces where, yes, problems are solved, but they aren't work groups that are dissecting broken processes, right? These are people who are committed to creating a better working environment and always seeking opportunities to shift the culture for the better. When we think about how the principles of words create worlds and images inspire action apply to building an appreciative mindset, one of the most transformative experiences I had working in a group, we were put into groups of 3. Now, mind you, this was a group that knew each other and who had worked well, but we were put into groups of 3. And what we had to do was one person had to observe, one person had to speak, and one person had to listen. The speaker's job was simply to tell the listener the things that they appreciated about them. The observer's job was to take notes for that process, while the listener just got to listen and hear from their peer. These are the things that you're doing well. These are the things that I appreciate about the value that you bring to the table. They got to sit in that, and then they had a document. Each of us got a document that we got to take home and reflect on upon our strengths and the value that we were bringing. That created conditions where all of us wanted to do more of what we were doing well, because we felt seen and we felt recognized and we felt valued. And we were able to, and was it uncomfortable to just sit and receive? Yes, 100%, right? Absolutely, it was difficult to sit and receive, right? But that's part of this, is really being able to sit with appreciative feedback and develop our capacities. This is not our norm for problem solving. Our norm for problem solving looks in very different directions. We are actually talking about something fairly radical here when we take this positive approach, right? Inquiry creates change as a principle when we think about an engagement tool. I'm sure that some of you have probably done StrengthsFinder assessments, right? StrengthsFinder asks, when are we at our best? How do we do more of what we do well? That inquiry of what are my strengths creates change in teams when we are thinking about an appreciative approach. And so as an engagement tool, there's many different ways that can be applied in group context and thinking about individual development for engagement. But it definitely aligns with our engagement model as a means of generating positive movement. I also want to unpack this as a coaching tool. So what you see on this slide here is the AI model on the left and the coaching, our Cal coaching model on the right. The Cal coaching model, right, is discover, understand the situation, explore your options, plan actions, and then act and provide support, right? This aligns almost identically with the AI model, right? This define and discovery phase is really the discover phase in the coaching model, right? You can see how these blend together, what we're trying to get at with this. The dream phase is the same as the explore act. Let's explore our possibilities. What is possible? What could be possible? If things were working the way we wanted them to, what would they look like? If things were, if this worked, how would you know it worked? Right? And then the design phase is the plan. What is the design? What is the plan? What are you going to do to support the growth and the movement that you're looking to grow? And destiny is the act. These overline. This is really, for me, the deepest point at which an appreciative approach can impact our employee experience as a whole, shifting our conversations from talking about what's broken and what we don't have to one where we can directly acknowledge the strides that we're making. We can acknowledge the places where we're succeeding and can learn from them to evolve better and more effective approaches in those spaces, and opportunities to apply them in areas we might be struggling or want to improve. I think this is the part where we really have the greatest ability to shift the balance of the water we're swimming in when we take an appreciative approach to coaching conversations, right? It allows us to shift the attention from underperformance, failure, lack of motivation, to really developing a deeper and constructive understanding of a person's experience of being human and being an employee in a system that is, because it's a system, it's inherently flawed, right? How do we manage our very human responses to that in a way that actually generates positive change? And so, right, I think, again, this is really the place where the rubber meets the road. And at its core, I want to acknowledge our Achieve Together questions are an exercise in appreciative inquiry. Our first question, what goals did you accomplish in this period? In what ways does your work connect to our overall strategy and mission? That's about, right, like really discovering and understanding and like, why does your work matter, right? That's asking that question. What do you like best about your work? When are you at your best? These are the Achieve Together questions that we should be having with our staff every, 3 times a year. How have you supported others' work and or collaborated in them? We're asking people for examples. Where have you been successful? How can I support you in being more successful? Right? Our last question, what can I do as your supervisor to better support your success? This is appreciative inquiry. That is what we are doing in our performance development conversations. It is appreciative inquiry. Let me turn it, Pam, to you to talk about advising.
I love that, Sabina. In a way, as I'm thinking about this, it's kind of infusing that mindset into all of the different areas that we work in, like using appreciative inquiry. Well, I mean, our check-in questions are appreciative inquiry questions, but sort of coming in with that mindset and thinking about coaching in that mindset and strategic planning in that mindset. And did want to also spend some time about advising in that mindset. The advising group has a set of competencies that they've divided into 5 different parts: conceptual, informational, relational, technological, and personal. And these are essentially broken into 2 categories: knowledge and skills. And they center around the idea of continuous learning, both for the student and the advisor, and supporting the student's journey through Berkeley. The 2 that really most pertain to what we're talking about here is the relational and the personal. The relational deals with the ability to employ interpersonal skills needed to facilitate a student-centered, inclusive, and culturally sensitive advising relationship. The ability to reflect on and adapt one's practice to improve rapport. So that in that space, you would be using a lot of appreciative inquiry strategies and style questions to be extracting information from students to support their journey forward. Within the other one is the personal, the ability to engage in regular analysis and self-assessment of the advising practice to learn, grow, and improve performance. And again, we can see these principles of AI, that those notions of positive questions, that words create worlds, choosing what we study or how we want to describe things. The moment we ask a question, we begin to create some change. So if, as an advisor, you're asking an appreciative inquiry type question, immediately as you do that, a person's world can start to shift away from maybe what's the problem to what's the direction I want to be moving into. And finally, the human systems move in the directions of the images. So again, that direction where we're looking is where we're going to be headed. So these all play into the advising model that's used at Berkeley as well. All right. I believe we have indicated that we're going to be doing some practice with some of these. And our first breakout room is really about practicing with questions. So we're not going to be asking you to do any coaching or any of that. We're going to be getting into a room and thinking about questions. As you move into these groups, I'm hoping that we can all respect confidentiality if anything is shared that could be private. Provide opportunity for each person in the group to speak And if you choose not to speak, that's okay. You may also pass. So in your breakout groups, and we'll be putting these directions in the chat, introduce yourself, your name, pronouns, and department. And we're going to be giving you a scenario that we want you to review together. Take a moment to think, and then go around the room and consider the various principles of appreciative inquiry. And I can ask, oh, you won't have that. Well, anyway. And I'm going to ask you to think about what questions you would ask in this particular scenario.
Colin, if you can move the next slide, it's got some of this on there, please.
Okay, so here's your scenario. A student arrives in your office in tears. They just failed a midterm in a course required for their major. To complicate matters, they also recently ended a year-long relationship. The student wants to withdraw from all their courses, insisting that they just can't do this now. The whole world is stacked against them. The student acknowledges that they have anxiety and desperately fear failing. So in your breakout rooms, and you'll be put into breakout rooms of about 3 or 4 for 10 minutes, the idea is not to solve the problem. The idea is simply to brainstorm questions that you might want to ask this student that have an AI focus.
What we would love to have happen is if you would share in the chat some of the questions that your group came up with. You're also welcome to share any observations or questions that you had, and we will respond to those in the chat as appropriate. But we'd love to be able to see what kind of questions you came up with. And I'm just going to tell you, this is probably one of the hardest parts of this whole thing, just like it is in coaching, asking open-ended questions and then adding an appreciative lens to them. This is hard work. So if you struggled with this, that's okay. Practice makes perfect, right? It's okay. This is hard. So again, we just love to see those questions in the chat. I do want, because we have a second activity for you that I want to get to, so I want to be mindful of time. So we're going to go ahead and talk about what conditions are necessary. So let's go ahead and advance to that slide, right? So when might you use an appreciative inquiry approach? What conditions do you really need to be successful in this type of approach? Honestly, right, this is, again, we talked about trust being an important factor for appreciative inquiry. Traditional problem solving works really well in simple systems or for problems where there's a single, easily identifiable cause. When there are multiple causes or a system is complex, it really does become more productive to identify what's already working and build on it. When you have recurrent problems that suggest that the fixes already tried are not addressing root causes or that some causes have been missed. So even if all the causes are identified, the interactions between them can be too complex to predict that any given fix could guarantee a lasting resolution, right? So if problems are recurrent, that might be a good time to think about using AI. If your attempted fixes have made things worse, or there really is no clear diagnosis or course of action that's emerged from your current approach, AI is fantastic. What it really offers you is an approach to systemic issues from a different angle. And so this has been shown to, in fact, tackle issues at their root and enable people to be creative in the resolution of their problems. What it seeks to create is really the generation of internal knowledge and new ideas that are specific to the person or organization. What you're not doing is you're not taking externally sourced and predetermined ideas, because then you're stripping agency and personal perspective in the process. AI infuses that agency and personal perspective. So really it's most useful in the context of team building or really using participatory methods. And when you need to give a clear, positive future direction to the present that has been sketched out by all parties involved, appreciative inquiry really does give you a method to be able to do so. And what it does is it encourages people to verbally relive and share their experiences. The driving idea is really to give a central role to storytelling. Open-ended questions prove themselves effective in sparking animated conversation and dialogue and story. By contrast, just like coaching, dead-end questions that elicit a yes or no response really aren't so helpful. We really want to pull on that story. And so we should avoid those yes or no questions. So what we want to do is I'm going to turn it over to Pam to introduce our last activity for the day, where we really get to practice with story.
All right, we wanted to do some practice and have this practice really be kind of on you, so you get to experience what it's like to go through an appreciative inquiry experience. So I'm going to be giving you a prompt, and we're going to spend a few minutes writing, and then I'll give you the next instructions. Here's the prompt. Think of a specific time, recently or a while back, when you were at your very best. You may have been facing a particularly difficult situation, or you may have enhanced an already positive situation. You are expressing the qualities that make you feel the most authentic and energized. The experience made you feel proud and happy to be alive. Develop a story for that experience or for that moment in time. So I'm going to give you about 5 minutes just to think for a few minutes and to write. It can be hard to shift in this mindset, but I want us to start thinking about our own strengths and how you can do more of that. I'd like you to give this story a beginning, a middle, and an end. And try to make the ending as powerful as you can. Take an approach of reliving that positive experience in your mind as if you were watching it. And I'm going to put a couple of questions into the chat for you to think about as you write. What happened? What role did you play? What did you do that was particularly successful? What values were reflected in the experience? And what kind of feelings did you experience? Oh, thanks, Colin. So I'm going to just give you a 5 minutes, and we will then come back and I'll give you the next instructions.
If you're uncomfortable, note your discomfort. It's okay, right? Sometimes we really have a hard time thinking about positives and talking about ourselves in this light. So just know that if this is uncomfortable for you, that's not unusual. And we just want you to notice the discomfort too, and try and be with what has really worked well.
So we're going to move out into breakouts again, and the slide is lying. We're not going to be able to give you 12 minutes, but we'll probably give you maybe about 8. And what I'd like you to do is quickly introduce yourselves and choose a person 1 and a person 2. Share your story and share what you see as your strengths. And take a minute for person 2 to ask some follow-up questions, and how might you coach this person to do more of that? After about 4 minutes or so, we'll have you switch, and person 2 will share their story, and person 1 will listen, and you'll just swap that experience. Person 2 will share what they see as their strengths, and person 2 will ask follow-up questions and may possibly see additional strengths.
So we only have about 3 minutes left in this conversation. So what we would love to have you do in this time is I'd love to get at least one volunteer who'd be willing to share what that was like to write and share your story. And then we'd love to hear the reflections from others in the chat if you're willing. But can I get one volunteer who's willing to talk about what was that like for you?
Okay, I will give it a shot. It was very empowering because it reminded me of a time of struggle that I was able to, get past and go beyond. Sharing it, being able to share kind of the strong pieces of, what got me through, and the feelings and the support I had at the end of this challenge was like, yeah, I just felt warm and fuzzy when I was sharing.
I love it. Because, right, because you are grounded in a challenge. It's not like your story was not talking about a problem that you were facing or addressing, right? But you have tools and you have resilience and you have gifts that are working in your favor. How do we name them and claim them so we can really own them? And again, I'd love to hear from anyone else in the chat because we do want to be respectful of your time. We do have about a minute left. If anyone has any questions for Pam or I, we'd love to answer any questions that you have.
Yeah, I think I just, if it's okay, I'd love to share a reflection and to just share also some appreciation for the two of you, Sabina and Pam, while we have folks still here with us. If we could just give a round of applause for Sabina and Pamela for facilitating today and for presenting and preparing this material, and for, again, sharing a wonderful new or revisiting framework that you can take with you as another overlay to the approach that you take to support people in their transformation and in their growth. And just as a reflection, I know, hey, I'm already using it in a lot of different ways, and want to say thank you, Pam, and thank you for Sabina for encouraging, us for application and for sharing how we can use this in an organizational context, a strategic planning context, the mindset that we have in these spaces, and as an engagement tool and as a coaching approach. So I love it. Absolutely. So cool. Shauna, we've got your hand up here, so I want to make sure to bring your reflection or question or comment in before we tap out.
Just one quick note of thanks before we end. When you asked for feedback, there was like crickets, and I just want to let you know we are paying attention. We are, we listened, we took in a lot of information. This was so rich there, and it's so much fodder for great thought. I think we're all just kind of processing, but I just want to say thank you so much. Job well done. This was a great presentation.
Thanks, Shauna. Thank you all. This has been really fun.
Pam, Sabina, are y'all open to folks following up with you if they'd like to sort of noodle on this topic a little bit further?
Absolutely.
Awesome, cool. Well, thank you so much, everybody. We will be communicating with you about our next session when we have the date. We have our development team working on a coaching for goal setting session. It's Lila Naranjo from Student Affairs, Christopher Hun from Electrical Engineering Computer Science, and Tammy Dawson, one of our CCN team members from the law school. So stay on the lookout for our next session to be announced. Isaac, I saw you come off mute there. Anything you'd like to share before we leave? And for folks who got to go, see you later and have a wonderful day.
I just want to say thank you. It was a wonderful presentation. I'm looking forward to reading the transcript as well as viewing the video.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here and sticking with us the whole time. We really appreciate it.